This is my setup. Leaf wall, wooden shelf, wooden rack, and a white desk. Let's fix that. The obvious way to start off this project was clear to me. I started off by ordering the largest power strip I've ever seen, along with a massive box of cable management supplies. After that was picking out the legs. I spent an endless amount of time looking through Amazon and other websites trying to find the right legs for the desk. In the end, I settled on these ones from hairpinlegs.com, and although I did have to make some alterations to them, I think they were the right choice for the desk. In addition to those, I also grabbed an Olaf leg from Ikea as a center support. I know it's totally overkill, but I do plan to mount a monitor to the desk later on, so just in case, there's no case of sagging or bending once that is mounted. Next, I picked out the top for the desk. I wanted to go with a Butcherblock, so there's basically two options for material if you're going to do it affordably. You're either going to have to go with acacia or Havea. In my case, I went with a 72 by 25 acacia Butcherblock from Lowe's. Going on finish just allowed me to have complete control of the color and the finish of the desk, and I really liked the variation in the acacia compared to how the Havea looked. For the color of the desk, I went with an espresso stain from Home Depot, and then I layered that with a polyacrylic clear satin finish on top. Finally, the last two things I had to pick up were some 1-inch lags to attach the desk to the legs, as well as a 45-degree chamfer router bit to give the desk a nice edge as a finishing touch. The first step was staining the Butcherblock. I started off by sanding it all down, starting with 120 grit, then 150, and then finally 220 to ensure that everything was nice and smooth. After sanding, I went along the edge with the router using the 45-degree chamfer bit. Overall, this is probably the favorite thing that I did to the desk, and it really gave it a nice finishing touch. I'd really recommend it over just leaving the edges sharp how the Butcherblock comes. It really does just kind of tie everything together and give it a real premium feel. After the top was sanded and routed, I started with the pre-stain. So I just did a thin coat on both sides and let it sit for 10 minutes before wiping off the excess. After that was the first coat of stain, and it's pretty much the same process, except I let it sit for 2 hours in between the coats. I ended up doing 3 coats of the espresso stain, which got it to this really nice, dark and rich color. The important thing to remember when you're staining is to always stain with the grain and also wipe it off before it completely dries so you get a nice even color. After that third coat, I left it out overnight in the garage, so when I brought it into the house, it wouldn't be too stinky. In my previous projects like my rack and my shelf, I ended up bringing them in way too early, and it just fills the room with this horrible chemically smell that lasts for like 3 days. So after leaving it out there, I brought it into the house in the morning and I got started on the finish. I ended up doing 4 coats of the clear satin finish with sanding in between each coat to get it really nice, smooth, and even. Between each coat, I gently sanded with 220 grit sandpaper and then went back with a little bit more detail and hit the rough spots. I let each coat sit in between for about 2 hours before sanding, and I let the last coat sit for about 4 or 5 before attaching the legs. For that last coat, I actually didn't use the sandpaper at all, and I ended up just hitting it with a crumpled brown paper bag. I thought the sandpaper would be a little bit too abrasive and might leave the top looking uneven. So in the meantime, while I waited for that to dry, I got started on the alterations for the legs. The only problem with the legs I got was the depth. The depth of the legs was 25.5 inches, and the Butcherblock is only 25. This just means that there would have been a 1/4 inch sticking out on both sides, which would have looked pretty bad. The way I fixed this is just by taking a 1/2 inch off of each side with the jigsaw. I did end up losing 4 of the 8 mounting holes, so to fix that, I just drilled another hole in the center to ensure once everything was connected, it would be super solid. To finish up the alteration, I just hit that edge with a little bit of black spray paint to tie it all together so there wasn't any raw metal showing on the legs. After waiting for all that stuff to dry, I got ready to connect everything. Really the only thing left to do was flag the pre-drill bit at 3/4 of an inch just to make sure I didn't drill through the entire block on accident. To attach the legs, I started off by making sure they were centered and straight by measuring 3 inches off of the side of the desk, and then I went ahead and hit each of the holes I drilled with a Sharpie. Then I went ahead and moved the leg aside and hit each of those marks with the pre-drill and made sure to stop at the flag so I didn't go through the top of the Butcherblock. To attach them, like I mentioned before, I ended up using some 1-inch lags as well as some washers, and then I went ahead and screwed them down halfway and rechecked my measurement of 3 inches off the side. After I ensured that was right and they were still straight and centered, I went ahead and screwed them in the rest of the way. For the center Olaf leg, I measured to the center of the desk and just attached them with the screws that they came with. Finally, the last thing to mount was the power strip, and pretty similarly to the Olaf leg, I just centered it onto the desk and then attached it with the brackets that it came with. After that, it was finally time to flip it over and see how it all turned out. Overall, I think this really turned out great, but there's one thing I definitely overlooked when I was building this. There's no storage in the desk. My old desk had 2 drawers in it, which I really didn't realize how useful they were till I built this new one. I think I'll end up getting some kind of small rolling filing cabinet for under the desk, but until then, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I think it looks great. If you're looking to do this yourself, really it's a super easy project. The only hard part is being patient and waiting for all the stains and finishes to completely dry before hopping on to the next step. Anyways, I think the next project I'm going to tackle for the setup, and this is the one I've been putting off the longest, pretty much just due to the cost. Building a PC is just super daunting, but it's definitely an upgrade that's way overdue. But yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed and want to build a desk for yourself. But yeah, have a great rest of your day, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye.